And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for first day of the weekend tomorrow, Saturday. We've got a lot of IFR here out of the Bering Sea and along the Alaska Peninsula. Areas IFR through the interior and marginal VFR conditions lowering here as moisture pushes northward into the southern Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, marginal VFR, and that extends eastward across the Gulf right into areas of the southeast coast. For the afternoon, Prince of Wales Island eastward, marginal VFR, VFR to the north, breaking out the VFR here for just all of the North Gulf Coast. And then the exception being marginal VFR slipping up into western Prince William Sound there, moving on into Portage Pass, southern Kenai Peninsula, and some IFR now showing up southern Kodiak Island. Areas of marginal VFR up there for the Arctic coast. Otherwise, the interior looking really good, solid VFR, north slope southward. And IFR mostly off the southwest coast here, covering Nunivak Island and up to, say, Gamble there in St. Lawrence Island, down to possibly the Pribilofs, and then southwest Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula IFR, marginal VFR for the Aleutians. Sunday morning, band of IFR here, pretty good band from the northern Bering Sea right on down into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, with some of that extending into the southwest hills and mountains. IFR, east side of Kodiak Island into Kamishak Bay, marginal VFR now, Kenai Peninsula, and western Cook Inlet, covering Prince William Sound, back along and just off the eastern North Gulf Coast. But saying VFR for the morning hours Sunday here for the Panhandle. Interior looking really good right up to the at least western Arctic coast. And then for the afternoon, eastern Arctic coast goes VFR as marginal VFR slips into the west side there, extending down through the Bering Strait, across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, Yukon Delta, up into the southwest mountains again, and marginal VFR Kodiak Island into southern Cook Inlet and western Cook Inlet as well, and then covering a good portion of the Kenai Peninsula up into Prince William Sound, stays VFR for the southeast coast, and then some IFR here with a system right through the eastern Aleutians, up and around, and then back down, covering the remainder of the, well, especially Adak and Atka, westward to about Kiska Island. And for passes, Anatupik and Atigan, VFR day coming up for the afternoon Saturday. Same forecast for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. Alaska Range looking good. VFR for Rainy, Windy, Isabel, Mentasta, and Tanita, good VFR. Portage, though, starts out VFR and then watching for some moisture, possibly bringing lower conditions to marginal VFR, eastern entrance, eventually pushing a little to the west there. And for Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels here, well, we've got 2,000 feet here up into the Bering Sea, 4,000 feet up over the Alaska Peninsula to a certain extent there. Otherwise, that's about all to see on this graphic. So moving into icing, widespread area of icing here covering the Bering Sea and extending down into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and right along the coast of the Yukon Delta there up to about St. Lawrence Island, icing free east and to the north, and then an increasing potential for some icing here for the coastline of the Panhandle from about Yakutat southeastward into western Dixon entrance. And the jet stream here, high pressure, ridging from the northeast Pacific on up and toward the Bering Strait. To the north and east of that, we've got northwest winds, 75 knots, cutting across the eastern Brooks Range and Arctic coast, with the main stronger winds in across western Canada, east of the Panhandle there. And then we've got south winds up to 90 knots coming into the Alaska Peninsula, falling back to about 65 knots there near the Pribilof Islands and continuing up to the northwest. For the 9,000 foot winds, we've got, again, ahead of some frontal action out here over the Bering Sea, south to southeast winds anywhere well up to 40 to 55 knots here. Looks like strongest over the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure, lighter winds, central eastern interior, but still some pretty good westerlies coming over the top of that high. 35 knots over the Chukchi Sea, then up to 45 knots out of the northwest there over the eastern Brooks Range. And that continues southward at about 35 to 40 knots here across the eastern interior and down across and just off the coast of the Panhandle. 3,000-foot winds, a lot less to look at this elevation here. Not too bad for the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, eastern interior up to the north, but the gradient between the high here to the east and then much lower pressure out there to the west. Good south to southeast wind flow, 40 to 55 knots here, coming up across the Alaska Peninsula, falling back to about 35 knots there for the northwest coast. And for turbulence, moderate chop there from west of Adak out to about Kiska Island or so. Moderate turbulence St. Lawrence Island, as well as about the Kuskokwim Bay area in across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, not too bad, looking rather smooth everywhere else.